At this very moment, there was a huge announcement in the White House regarding to the Middle East. 724 days after the October 7th massacre, the United States President and Israel's Prime Minister are closing a deal in the 21 Points Initiative. So the United States President was asked if there will be a deal and answered in the affirmative after he spoke beforehand with the Emir of Qatar. And now, in these very minutes, we just saw what is happening at the live joint press conference of the two leaders in the hall that was reserved for historic declarations. United States President Donald Trump delivered remarks in a joint statement with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and said that this may be one of the greatest days in history. So I'm Yair Pinto, and with me today now for this live broadcast is Shoshani, and we are boots on the ground reporting to you on what's happening in Israel and the Middle East. And we are on the most important day that will be written in world history. So make sure to subscribe, click the like button, leave a comment, and let's continue. So the Netanyahu-Trump meeting took place today in Washington, centered on Trump's 21-point outline for returning the hostages and ending this war. So what happened today, you're surely asking? The Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, arrived for his meeting at the White House with the President of the United States, Donald Trump. And at the same time as Netanyahu's presence in the White House, a senior delegation from Qatar also arrived to the White House. In addition, it was reported that Qatar told President Trump and other Arab states that it is able to get Hamas to say yes to a deal that will also include disarmament. As a reminder, on Sunday, Netanyahu was interviewed by the American news channel Fox News, and amongst other things, he referred to the contacts to end the war through Trump's plan and the issue of the day after inside the Gaza Strip. And during the interview, Netanyahu said, "We are now working with President Trump's team on the 21-point plan, and we hope to advance the deal successfully." And a senior Qatari delegation arrived on Monday, just today, from Doha to Washington to close a deal for the release of all the hostages. So according to the report, the delegation is expected to arrive at the White House apparently the same time that Prime Minister Netanyahu is on site. And meanwhile, at the welcoming at the entrance to the White House, President Trump said that he is very confident that there will be peace inside the Gaza Strip soon. The president was asked by reporters whether there will be a deal to end the war in the Gaza Strip, and he replied in the affirmative. Sky News in Arabic reported today that Qatar updated Washington that it has the ability to persuade Hamas to accept Trump's plan and to give up its weapons. The report is based on American sources, and all this led to the statement that just took place a few minutes ago. And now, Shoshani, would you like to present what was declared in big points before we dive into the details?
Yes, Yair, this has been very dramatic, very substantial. And I want to really break down everything that's been happening in the last couple hours. First of all, what we're looking at is the culmination of weeks of planning, weeks of negotiations, weeks of backdoor and back channel negotiations and relationship building that have taken place by the Trump administration and by the Israeli government together and with other countries. It's also multiple weeks, and this is according to the words of President Trump tonight, multiple weeks of working towards what is being announced today and what is about to be made public in the next couple hours in the agreement that's made. And this is sort of a continuation of the 21-point plan that's been floated several times by the U.S. administration, but in greater detail and with much more emphasis on what's actually going to happen. And I'm going to read some of the highlights that Trump talks about. I've been taking notes as this happened. Very, very, very powerful press conference that takes place between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. The two of them, by the way, actively sort of giving plentiful compliments to each other Clearly, they've been enjoying this process. Clearly, they're very proud of what they've done, and they want the world to know where we're going. And where we're going is the next step. It's the next step of the relationship, the next step of the cooperation between Israel and the U.S., and the next step of what's going to happen in the Gaza Strip and the rebuilding of that. So here's what President Trump says. First of all, President Trump makes a very clear point of saying, I am the one who made this deal. Without me, no other president would have been able to do this. He names by name President Biden and said he wouldn't have been able to do this. I'm the one who brought this agreement forward. More so, I've been addressed or asked by the countries that are going to be part of this agreement. The list of that, by the way, is not made public yet in full, but we're going to guess on that in a bit. He says to the people, he says, I've been asked to be the chair of this coalition of countries, the countries that are going to promote this deal, this new contract, this new type of relationship that's going to take place in the Middle East. Then he says several things that are very, very important to note and delay on. He says Hamas will have no place in this coalition. They will not be party to it. They will not be part of it. And people and organizations such as Hamas will not take part in this relationship building, in this plan to rehabilitate the Gaza Strip and this region altogether. Then he says something that I found to be very interesting. He says that they've been working, he says, for many weeks, and take that as you may. It might be a few weeks, it might be months that he's been working to rebuild what's going to happen here with the Arab countries that are part of this deal. And he says, Trump's words were many weeks before the UN General Assembly, that they were planning, preparing, and building up towards this process. And clearly, what you just alluded to, Yair, where the Qataris say they think that Hamas is willing, it's a lot more than think. It seems they've done a very careful job of buttoning up every possible angle of this agreement and making sure that everyone is going to be able to carry out and deliver what they discussed in this agreement, namely, of course, the ceasefire, the return of the hostages, and everything that goes into that package. Then Trump sort of looks back to what was in the original Abraham Accords and says, we're about to repeat this. What we did there was powerful. What we did there was historic. What we did there was something that I did and I'm very proud of. Points to his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, points to Netanyahu, points to others in the room and sort of reminds them of how proud they are of what they've done in the Abraham Accords and reminds them that we might be doing that again, looking at another phase of those accords. Then he referenced the fact that Israel and the U.S. have a very close friendship and tie. And the example he gives of that is the bombing mission, which is called Midnight Hammer. We did an explainer on this, by the way, recently. Midnight Hammer, where the U.S. bombed, together with Israel, the Iranian nuclear facilities back in the 12-day war in June. And he looks back and says, here's an example of what it looks like when we work together. Here's an example of what our cooperation truly looks like. And he says very clearly, this is President Trump, that he intends to end the war, that the goal here is to end the war, and the goal is to get, and his words are, our hostages, not their hostages, not the Israeli hostages. He says to get all our hostages back. And he makes a point of saying that more than once, which I find to be very important. Get the hostages, have peace, and he says have prosperity and build relationships and friendships. President Trump makes this very rosy, this very positive image of what's going to happen in the Middle East. Then we go to Prime Minister Netanyahu. Prime Minister Netanyahu stands there quite happy, quite proud of what is going on in the place. But he says he wants to be very clear. Israel's goals are the same as we enter this next phase of the negotiation and discussion. Israel's goals are, we want all the hostages back, and we want Hamas out. We want them removed fully from the Gaza Strip to no longer be in a place of leadership, and all the hostages back in a very clear timeline. We'll break that up in a second because the timeline is a lot more clear, as are the steps that the IDF needs to take than they were in past conversations in recent days. But it's very, very substantial. Then Prime Minister Netanyahu talks about the fact that he addresses the Qatari Prime Minister, Mohammed al-Thani, and he says to him that he calls the Qatari Prime Minister to apologize for the fact or lament the fact that Israel had to strike within Qatar. And he clearly says, look, this wasn't against you as a government. This was against Hamas. And we regret the fact that a Qatari national was killed in this attack. But Prime Minister Netanyahu says, he says, one way or another, regardless of whether or not Hamas receives this or does not receive this, we will end this war. And he says it several times. He says it can be done in a good way or by a bad way, but we're going to end the war against Hamas and we're going to end it victorious. And he's essentially saying whether or not they agree to this, it doesn't matter. We're going on to fully stop Hamas, to fully harm Hamas. Then Netanyahu addresses the topic which has been the hot potato or the hot topic for days now, which is the recognition of a Palestinian state. President Trump also addresses this. Prime Minister Netanyahu thanks President Trump and says to him that he deeply appreciates the U.S. under his leadership standing together with Israel in resisting the recognition of a Palestinian state, specifically the unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state. And then Netanyahu says something that he said also over the stage at the UN General Assembly on Friday. He says to the audience, look, guys, if you expect the Palestinian Authority to change its skin, to change its nature, you're up for a disappointment. We'd love to see this change. We'd love to see a peaceful resolution. But, this is an important but we don't see this happening anytime soon. This is a problematic entity. And he goes on to thank President Trump. He goes on to thank the friendship between Israel and the United States and to state strongly that this is a chance for a very substantial recognition. And then Netanyahu says several times, he says that President Trump is the number one, this is his words, the number one friend of Israel ever. He says more than any other leader before him. I agree with that. President Trump has said that very, very clearly. And Netanyahu actually goes on quite a long line of thought, stating to the world how much appreciation he has and our government has for the young men and women who fought in this war against the evil of Hamas. And this is really very, very clear in the line of thought and the thought process by Netanyahu and also by President Trump, is that Israel has to fight the evil that created October 7th, that it must stop the evil of October 7th, that he must fight against that evil. And he praises the valor, the bravery of the young Israeli soldiers, and especially those who are lost in this war, and calls and hopes on a peaceful resolution. By the way, Netanyahu and Trump both talk in extent, or to a great degree, about what they're calling the trilateral agreement, which is the U.S. on one side, Israel on the second, and Qatar on the third, which is sort of the resolution and mediation mechanism in this entire agreement. And it really shows us how important this is. Now, here's what the details of what they're discussing, and we'll go, Yair and I, into this in just a second. What it is a immediate and quick release of the hostages. This has been the hinge point for Israel, for the U.S. in every single negotiation up till now, with Witkoff, without Witkoff. It's always been the point. Do we get our hostages back immediately? And this agreement, this outline, states the number 72 hours. That within 72 hours, all the hostages are returned to Israel. That is very, very dramatic. And of course, later on, the plan is, and we'll get into this in a sec, the plan is to go in greater length in slowly allowing Israel to withdraw from the fighting positions deep in the Gaza Strip, to allow international forces to safely take over and safeguard the transition of civil governance to an international entity that is appointed and sent by the international Arab countries specifically, and importantly, to make sure that Hamas doesn't remain in power. One more thing that's interesting here that I'm going to delay on is the fact that President Trump doesn't actually say who all the countries that are party are, but he says many countries have ideas, but these countries that are working with us have both ideas and a lot of money. So here's our easy guess here: Qatar and the Saudis. These are the people he's talking about. The Emiratis are already in the picture and have been for years through the Abraham Accords. This is what he's talking about. Overall, and I'll wrap up here, substantial press conference, very meaningful statements by both Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump, and a very clear future that they present, stating this is where we're going. And whether or not Hamas cooperates, we're going full throttle towards this goal. We're turning all the hostages, and an expectation by an international contingency of countries to get every last hostage back. So that's really what I took from this conference. I've seen a true sign of friendship, camaraderie, and alliance between Israel and the U.S. as President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu engage with each other. Really significant night, really significant conversation taking place, and a really historic moment in presenting this detailed 21-point plan to the international community.
Yeah, Mati, definitely. This was A very, very significant day. And for those of you who are just joining us live now, I'm Yair Pinto, and with me is Shoshani. And we're boots on the ground, bringing you all the truth about what is happening in Israel. And this is day 724 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the militias in Iraq, the Palestinian terrorist organizations in Judea and Samaria. All of them are taking their orders from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. And just a second before we begin, I want to call on all of you to help us share the truth. So we, Mati, our dedicated team at Boots on the Ground, are here day and night, as you can see, to bring you all the information that's happening on the ground in Israel, in this conflict, so that you will know how to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, for this situation. And the best way that you can help us spread this truth is by hitting the subscribe button, by hitting the like button, hitting the comment, leaving some comments in this live. I want to know where you're coming from. Is it important to stand with Israel? What do you think about this declaration between Trump and Netanyahu? Sounds very, very important. For those of you that just joined us, there was a joint declaration between President of the United States, Donald Trump, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to end the war in the Gaza Strip, to return all the hostages within 72 hours, and to plan for the day after this war to rehabilitate the Gaza Strip and to create multiple arrangements and agreements that will prosper everybody in this region. So all this day, Israeli and American teams patched up this agreement to repair Israel's disagreements to it. And now it became clear that in the first minutes of the meeting, that was delayed by 20 full minutes because the president of the United States was on the phone with the Qataris. After that, it turned out that after an attempted assassination of Hamas leaders in Doha, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu apologized to the Qatari leader in order to settle relations between the two countries. And during his meeting with United States President Donald Trump and with his mediation, Netanyahu apologized to Qatar's Prime Minister Mohammed el-Thani in a phone call from the White House. So Netanyahu apologized to the Qataris for the violation of sovereignty at Trump's demand, which joined his earlier statement that Israel committed not to act again in Qatar. Again, Israel is committed not to act against in Qatar. And in Washington, there is a Qatari delegation that had earlier held talks at the White House and is supposed to coordinate the hostage deal and pressure Hamas. In Doha, meanwhile, no official statements have been published on this issue. However, the Qataris are demanding, amongst other things, that Israel transfer compensation to the family of the Qatari security man who was killed in the strike. Following the meeting of the United States President Donald Trump and the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Americans officially published the 21 Points Initiative to end the war in the Gaza Strip. So this is the official announcement. The Gaza Strip will be a terror-free zone and will undergo de-radicalization so that it will not pose a threat to its neighbors. The Strip will be redeveloped for the benefit of its residents who have suffered enough. If both sides agree to this proposal, the war will end immediately. IDF forces will withdraw to the agreed line to prepare for the release of the hostages. During this time, all military operations, including air and artillery bombardments, will be suspended, and the front lines will be frozen until the conditions for a gradual and complete withdrawal are met. You can see the map next to me. So this is the first line, second line, and then third lines, all depending on the progress in the deal. First thing is to release the hostages, then to dismantle Hamas of its weapons. So within 72 hours of the public acceptance of this agreement by Israel, all the hostages, living and deceased, will be returned to Israel. After the release of the hostages, all of them, Israel will release 250 Palestinian convicted prisoners with life sentences that are in Israeli jails, plus 1,700 Gazans that were arrested after the October 7th of 2023 massacre, including all women and children that were arrested in this context. For every fallen Israeli hostage that will be returned, Israel will release the bodies of 15 Gazans. After the return of all the hostages, Hamas members who committed to peaceful coexistence and to disarming will receive amnesty. Operatives who wish to leave the Gaza Strip will receive safe passage to receiving countries that will accept them. And upon acceptance of this agreement, full aid will be sent immediately into the Gaza Strip, talking about humanitarian aid. At a minimum, the amount of aid will be consistent with what was included in the January 19, 2025 agreement regarding humanitarian aid, including rehabilitation of infrastructure, water, electricity, sewage, rehabilitation of hospitals and bakeries, and the entry of necessary equipment for debris removal and road opening. The entry, distribution, and aid into the Gaza Strip will be carried out without interference from either side via the United Nations and its agencies and the Red Crescent, in addition to other international institutions not connected in any way to either side. The opening of the Rafah crossing in both directions will be subject to the same mechanism applied under the January 19, 2025 agreement. So Gaza will be managed under the temporary and transitional rule of the Palestinian technocratic, that is apolitical, a committee responsible for operating daily public and municipal services for the people of the Gaza Strip. This committee will be composed of qualified Palestinians and international experts with oversight by a new international transitional body called the Peace Council, which will be chaired and led by President Donald J. Trump of the United States of America, with additional members and heads of states to be announced, including former Prime Minister Tony Blair. This body will set the framework and handle the financing of Gaza's redevelopment until the Palestinian Authority completes its reform plan, as described in various proposals, including President Trump's 2020 peace plan and the Saudi-French proposal, and can take the control of Gaza in a secure and in an effective manner after they have been reformed. So this body will be assisted by international best standards to create modern and efficient governments that serves Gaza's residents and contributes to attracting investment into the Gaza Strip. Trump's economic development plan for rebuilding and reviving Gaza will be created by convening a panel of experts who help give birth to some of the thriving modern miracle cities in the Middle East. In-depth investment proposals and also exciting development ideas have been formulated by well-intentioned international groups, and they will be considered in order to integrate the security and the government's framework to attract and facilitate these investments that will create jobs, opportunities, and hope for Gaza's future. So a special economic zone will be established with preferential tariff rates, meaning not so much taxes, and access to be negotiated with participating countries. No one will be forced to leave the Gaza Strip. The Palestinians will not be forced to leave the Gaza Strip, and anyone who wants to leave will be free to do so and free to return. We will encourage people to stay and offer them the opportunity to build a better Gaza. So, Mati, I must say, I have a lot of appreciation for Trump's ability to claim and calm the tempers in this situation and try to create a common ground for progress, at least according to Israel. But do you think that Hamas, a known terrorist organization with the sole purpose of destroying the Jewish people and taking control of all Israel, an organization that was created with the sole purpose of destroying the two-state solution option between Israel and a future Palestinian state, will agree to this plan?
I think that's a really good question. And I've been wondering in my head as information has been coming out over the last day or two about this upcoming sort of statement. I've been wondering if Hamas already is on the deal. And I'll explain why I'm saying that. Because the Qataris said this, and I referenced this a couple of minutes ago. The Qataris said that they think the Hamas terrorist organization will be positive towards this agreement. They don't think these kind of things. They check them in advance. The Qataris, they can be many things, but they're not, they're not amateurs in what they do, especially when it comes to diplomacy. They know how to communicate. They know how to check things in advance. They know how to run them through. And I'd say this also: the involvement of the Qataris, I think, is important to understand and to note as part of this entire conversation. The fact that they've been reinstated to their role as the negotiators in this. What happened tonight, where Prime Minister Netanyahu calls the Qatari Prime Minister and states to him, he says, Israel is not against Qatar. Israel is against the terrorists. Where we repent, or not repent, we lament the fact that a Qatari resident or citizen was hurt in this attack. That's all done for a show of respect and to help the Qataris to get their position as the big negotiators in this conversation once more. It's very, very important as this entire thing. And the big thing here to note is that both Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump, they say clearly, if Hamas doesn't cooperate here, if they're not part, Israel is going to finish this one way or another. It's going to be the hard way. It's going to be the easy way. You decide. One way or another, Hamas is not going to be left in Gaza. What does that practically mean on the ground compared to what's happening as we speak with the Israeli troops traveling through Gaza? I don't know how to answer that question, honestly, and I don't see an answer presented in the meeting that just took place. But there does seem to be a very substantial international coalition and thrust towards removing them. One more thing here is the timeline is so short that I feel like there must be another conversation that's already matured fully, where it's clear that Hamas is going to cooperate, where they've already, they've tallied how many hostages they're able to get out. They've communicated back and forth with Israel, the Qataris probably, to really let people know what's going to happen when this happens. They're talking about 72 hours to return the hostages. 72 hours is a very short amount of time. It's taken them in past negotiations, past phases of ceasefire agreements. It's taken them sometimes over a day just to move people between the hiding places and get them out. These things take time. And the fact that the timeline that's stated is so short, it indicates an incredible amount of pressure on behalf of the US, the Qataris, and Israel, but also that Hamas has probably already been discussing this topic and is much closer than we think to giving an answer to the question. Another big thing here is I don't think President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu would have made an announcement that says that there's already a coalition working towards building up the replacement for Hamas in the Gaza Strip if that didn't exist. That would be too big of a bluff. They clearly have countries that are waiting to supply the manpower, the funds, and the international diplomatic support to make sure that this happens. And they have already put in motion the pieces that are needed. Then the really big pieces, and this is sort of looping into everything we've been talking about over the last week, Yair, is the question of what happens on the day after. Because everyone has been making these big, grandiose declarations about the Palestinian Authority, but no one's really addressed the question of what happens with the Palestinian Authority. Who leads the Palestinian Authority? Not Mahmoud Abbas. Mahmoud Abbas is elderly. He's not in, he's not in great health. He doesn't have a clear successor. They have corruption problems. They have execution problems, not of people, of programs and plans. They have a huge problem in controlling the Gaza Strip. They're not there, and they're not even 12 months away from being there. And in Israel, there's a substantial mistrust in the ability of the Palestinian Authority to govern the Gaza Strip in the day after. And that begs the question, who will be able to govern the Hamas currently controlled Gaza Strip and the day after whatever this international coalition that is formed steps out of the equation? That's really a heavy and important question that needs to be answered. And I want to say this. People in Israel, by the way, in their response to this, I don't know if you've been watching this, Yair, as we're talking about this live. People in Israel are looking at this and saying, this is very similar to what Emissary Witkoff presented also multiple months ago, very similar to what he presented, slight modifications, but the grand gist of things is pretty much the same completely. And the question people are asking is, what's different now in the ability to execute compared to what it was before? Some of the answers we received tonight, the international coalition, the other Arab countries that are involved, but there's a lot of work that's needed here to really make this happen. That's at least my opinion.
Yeah, definitely, Matti. And I think that, as you said it looks like there is new hope here in Israel to end this war. And there was an answer to the big question that everybody was asking Prime Minister Netanyahu: what happens after we destroy Hamas? What happens with the Gaza Strip? And at least we got some answers. There will be a technocratic government. There will be people that know how to run governments, schools, systems, like countries that are not politicians, that are not part of the Palestinian Authority. They're not part of Hamas. They will have Palestinian elements. They will have professional members in this parliament, in this committee. And the most important thing is that Trump is leading this peace council. That's the biggest thing, because he's putting his name, his reputation on the success of this plan. And I think that's the key issue here, that he's invested in this plan, and that's why it's going to work. But in Israel, at this moment, people are still under war. We are still being launched rockets from the Houthis in Yemen, being threatened by Iran, and the situation is still hard. So in this troubling time, one of the most powerful ways that you can help Israel is actually by buying blue and white, meaning the color of the flag of Israel, blue and white products that are made here in the land itself. This way you can help the people of Israel rebuild and, get better financially with their shops, with their businesses. So at Blessed by Israel, we bring you handcrafted, high-quality treasures straight from the biblical heartland, and also from Judea and Samaria, right here in Israel. From fragrant olive oil and golden honey to nourishing soaps, creamy tahini, and rich coffee blends, every item carries the legacy of families faithfully working inside the promised land of Abraham. When you purchase these gifts, you're not just shopping, you're also blessing the Israeli people, supporting small family businesses, and fulfilling scripture. I will bless those who bless you. And it's never been easier. With flexible subscription options at discounted rates, you can keep standing with Israel month after month and get products from the Holy Land to your house. And by the way, I got these boxes of good stuff, olive oil, honey, for Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish high holiday, and it is top quality. So if you want yours, make sure to visit blessedbyisrael.com/stand. Again, that's blessedbyisrael.com/stand. And this way you can get a piece of Israel, of the best products, olive oil, honey, and other great stuff from the land of Israel, and support the people of this land. So this is a great opportunity, and it's actually great quality. I didn't give Mati his because it's all in my house. But let's conclude the
as it always is.
so let's conclude and see what's happening in the future of this war. Maybe we have like a few questions from our audience to want to respond to these declarations. What do they think will happen with this deal?
Who are you hoping is going to present the questions, Yair?
Yeah, okay. Yes, so.
Well, so I wanted to take 2 minutes just to remind people of the important notes, because I think a lot of people joined in the broadcast about 10-15 minutes after we started, to remind people of how important some of the things that were said today were in this broadcast. Very, not in this broadcast, in the press conference between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump. Really important statements that were made. And just I want to hit on them quickly on some of the big ones. The big pieces are guys, listen up. We're going for an agreement. There is a coalition of countries behind this agreement. The Qataris are part of them. The Saudis are likely part of them. There's money already propped up and ready to go. There's manpower that's ready to go. We have a plan and we have the people to carry out that plan. We're going to get the hostages back in 72 hours after the ceasefire is approved. It hasn't yet been approved, by the way. It's not signed yet fully. Trump promises 72 hours later, we have all the living hostages back. He also says, which is very, very dramatic, he says not only that, we have the plan to replace Hamas in the Gaza Strip. We have the countries, we have the international forces, we have the aid that's needed to replace Hamas in the Gaza Strip long term. Then Prime Minister Netanyahu responds to all these things. And he, first of all, really, really warmly thanks President Trump for everything that they've been doing, or the US has been doing for Israel in this season. Then he reminds him, he says, President Trump, you promised me several times that an October 7th event will never again take place as it did before. And we want to make sure this agreement is exactly that. And it doesn't matter if Hamas is cooperative or not, we're ending this war with good ways or the bad way, one way or another. We're ending this war and we're going to get our hostages back. And then he says a couple of really interesting things. He says, look, we're willing to try. We're very, very uncertain and lacking in conviction that the Palestinian Authority is able to carry out their role in this plan as it's presented, but we're willing to move forward. We don't see them changing their character. We don't see them being different than what they've done in the past, but we're moving forward with this plan and we'll figure it out, I guess, later on. But the main pieces here really are the important ones, is the 72-hour return of the hostages, the ceasefire that is gradual in removing the IDF from the Gaza Strip, and bringing in international forces that are made up of Arab wealth. So this is Qataris, Saudis, and others in this region will help rebuild the Gaza Strip, help remove Hamas, and create a replacement for civilian governance in that area. And if ever we've seen something that is dramatic, substantial, and historical in its nature, this is one of those moments, Yair. We're standing here in a moment, just watch this press conference. We're standing here in a moment where President Trump is doing something the likes of will be talked about many years in the future, presenting a future, a hope, optimism that wasn't on the table previously. And although many of these ideas were presented multiple times before, there wasn't the work or the homework wasn't done to allow this for happening fully. The coalition of countries wasn't in place. The financial backing for this wasn't in place. The full understanding and agreement and faith between Israel, the Qataris, the Americans, that didn't exist either. All of that has come into fruition. And of course, let's not forget Prime Minister Netanyahu calling the Prime Minister of Qatar to really bring him back into the fold fully and being supportive of this and taking back their role as the moderators or the negotiators in this entire agreement. One last thought is, my sense here is that a lot has been said that we're not yet aware of, both on the financial side of this, specifically with the Qataris and the Saudis, the role of Saudi Arabia after this kicks into place, specifically as it relates to a possible Abraham Accords 2.0, and of course, how we're going to get Hamas to give back the hostages. My sense is a lot has already been discussed and agreed on. We just haven't seen the transcripts or the information from those meetings yet. That's at least my sense. Yair, I have a question for you. How long do you think it's going to take for this to all kick into place? Because we were told we're still waiting for the signatures on the agreement. Do you think this is a matter of days, or are we talking weeks here?
Well, I think that in order to get all these countries that are needed to influence Hamas to execute this agreement, it will take more than a few days to get all the signatures and then to apply the necessary pressure on the terrorist organization. And even then, as you said, it will take Hamas longer than 72 hours to locate the bodies of the Israeli hostages, to locate some of the hostages. We've already been receiving reports that Hamas does not know the whereabouts of 2 living hostages just in recent days. We don't know if that's another psychological warfare that Hamas is using to pressure the people of Israel related to the hostages and their whereabouts. But this terrorist organization is very, very sneaky, and they will play every dirty trick that they have in their sleeves to make the lives of the people of Israel harder, to make this process as excruciating as possible for the families of the hostages. Their goal is to exert pressure, psychological pressure, fear, physical pressure. They will try until the last minute to kidnap an IDF soldier, which is what they've been trying to do in recent days. We've seen intensified attacks against IDF positions in the Gaza Strip. Hamas guerrilla terrorists will not stop. They will put the pressure on the IDF, trying to cause more casualties, trying to plant a picture of victory towards the Palestinians, towards the rest of the Arab world, that they will end this war with a win and not by losing. And we have just received a response from a Hamas official called Mahmoud Mardawi, who said to a Qatari Al Jazeera network that the Trump plan did not reach Hamas or any Palestinian leader until now. And the lines in this agreement are very close to the Israeli stance and the Israeli goals of ending this war. And he said, what's happening now is an attempt to struggle the momentum and the international recognition of a Palestinian state. He said that Hamas will not accept any proposal that will not include in it the fate of the Palestinian nation. He also said that they will check this proposal and will discuss it with the multiple Palestinian factions. This is according to Hamas official Mahmoud Mardawi. So, as you can see, Hamas are already, first of all, rejecting the plan, then immediately after saying, we'll discuss it amongst ourselves, but they will not give up without a fight, because basically this deal clearly states that Hamas will be disarmed of its weapons. So this is something that a terrorist organization does not do willingly, give up its arms, because basically it means it will not exist anymore. And also will give all the power to an international third-party body. The only good reason that this will happen is that in the deal, Hamas leaders that will give up their will to destroy Israel will be granted immunity and will not be persecuted or targeted by Israel if they agree to live in peacefully with the Jewish state as part of this agreement. So we'll see what happens on the ground, but anything can happen very, very soon. May I remind all of you that forget about Hamas. We still have other fronts that are threatening the Jewish state of Israel. The Houthis in Yemen are doubling down on their productions of suicide drones, placing their manufacturing facilities underneath the ground, hidden from the Israeli aerial strikes. And Iran is investing more funds in training commando ground forces, similar to what they used to have with the Radwan commando forces in Lebanon, with the sole purpose of infiltrating Israel. Yes, even though Yemen does not have a border with Israel, the Houthi terrorist regime, funded by Iran, are training commando ground troops in an attempt, and according to their plans, this is according to the intelligence information that we have so far, they want to launch a multiple front ground invasion towards Israel from other countries that are bordering Israel, including Syria, potentially Jordan. These are the two countries that were discussed so far. So hopefully this front will be over, but it doesn't mean that we're going to have peace in the Middle East.
Yeah, let's take this back to a practical place, because if we're going to go with what the Houthis are threatening, we can waste a lot of time on their empty threats. Look, I think one thing we haven't touched on yet is what Israel really needs to give in this negotiation. And this might sound trivial to people, but for Israel right now to say we accept that we're ending the ground maneuver in the Gaza Strip and starting to withdraw is a very significant thing. Prime Minister Netanyahu today clearly states that Israel is willing to do this, but there is such a big but connected to this that it's almost impossible to ignore it. Bless you, Yair. The huge disclaimer here is we will withdraw, but unlike what Hamas has requested in the past in multiple rounds of negotiation, it's Israel withdrawing slowly. First, we pull out of the big city centers, we get the hostages, and then we start withdrawing back from there. And the whole point here is saying to Hamas, look, you've been deceitful so many times before. We're simply not fully withdrawing from the Gaza Strip until we have the hostages. And when you give them back, we will be men of our word or women of our word, depending on who's saying it. And with the help of the Americans, we're fully withdrawing to the lines that were agreed on with a very safe security parameter in the Gaza Strip. And we're going to do that. We're going to do that consistently based on this agreement when we get the hostages. One other thing here is that one of the big items that's sort of been hovering in the air for several days is the question of a recognition of a Palestinian state. And part of this agreement, part of this presentation that was made today, it sort of shuffles the cards in this whole conversation of a Palestinian state, because it really puts things in motion towards a removal of Hamas. And then it leaves this question of a Palestinian state through the Palestinian Authority as a question that needs to be negotiated. Clearly, the Palestinian Authority can't just take over the Gaza Strip. They have nor the desire or the ability or the manpower to do so, and they've been very clear about that publicly, repeatedly. The big question here is what does that mean publicly? The U.S. right now is siding with Israel, siding with the return of the hostages, siding with ending the Gaza phase of this, and then it leaves the question of how do we build the relationship and the momentum in a positive way in Judea and Samaria. But I think just for everyone who's been watching, thank you for everyone who's watched this broadcast. I want to say this is not just any other live. This is a very significant moment in time in history, in the news cycle, and in the geopolitics of this region. A very substantial day and a very historical moment that we're going to be talking about a lot and seeing the implications of for many years to come.
Yeah, definitely. And more than that, there are just official reports from the organizations that are supporting and representing the families of the hostages in Gaza that are really welcoming and happy about these statements and embracing them, calling on the leaders that are signing this agreement to fulfill the commitments and release the hostages back to their loved ones in Israel. So this is a great time for optimism. This statement is really a hopeful future for the people of Israel, for the people of the Gaza Strip, for the hostages, for the IDF soldiers, for the reservists, to hope to not to do as many days in war as we have been doing so far. And one thing that I think is very important to mention regarding the map, if you guys can put the map right next to me, something that is very important, was a big issue throughout this war, is the Philadelphia corridor, okay? This little strip of land in the Gaza Strip, no, the other side, between Gaza and Egypt, okay? To the south, just the border between Gaza and Egypt. According to this map, it will be part of the security buffer zone under Israel's control. Okay, so Israel will have a security buffer zone surrounding the Gaza Strip completely. That means that no more terror tunnels beneath the Philadelphia border crossing of Gaza and Egypt, and no more smuggling attempts to rebuild the terrorist infrastructure of Hamas in the Gaza Strip without Israeli supervision. This is very big. Nobody talked about this, but this is a game changer in the security ability and the ability of the IDF to defend itself against any kind of terrorism from the Gaza Strip. So this has been the Israeli new security kind of agenda in the Gaza Strip, in Lebanon, in Syria, and in general. There should be buffer zones to give us enough time to defend ourselves against our enemies. And looks like this is implemented in this plan. And I think this is one of the key issues, makes me feel a lot safer knowing that we are controlling all the borders surrounding the Gaza Strip. And
Yeah,
anything to add,
yeah.
Mati?
I want to add one more thing. There's been a wave of responses within Israeli society about what's been announced tonight, and I want to just delay on one of them. One of the biggest groups of representatives of the hostage families, their name is Forum Tikva, the Hope Forum. They strongly support this agreement, and they came out with this very public statement saying this has been the goal all along: is returning all hostages, living and murdered, at once, not in a staggered process, not over time, but all at once, getting all the hostages back. And that is the hope in this plan. Finally, to get Hamas to agree to the point where they would give back all the hostages. Giving back all the hostages is admission by Hamas that the war is over. There's no other way to look at this. It's them admitting that the war is over, that Israel has won, and Israel can then withdraw and go back to some kind of sense of normalcy, which is what everyone has desired to do. So again, a lot of optimism, a lot of happy voices in Israel about this plan being presented, but also a sense of apprehension because we've been here before. I wanted to make sure that we actually get to follow through on this agreement, and we won't be once again disappointed by Hamas doing this. And I want to ask everyone at home for one last thing as we start wrapping up this live broadcast. I want to ask you guys to pray for this to take place, to pray for all the hostages to be returned, for the safeguarding of our soldiers. By the way, 5 Israeli soldiers were injured earlier today in the Gaza Strip. To pray for their supernatural healing in the fastest way possible, and to pray for the protection of all soldiers in Israel, outside of Israel, as they guard our borders, and for the swift and healthy return of every hostage to their families. That is the big mandate here. That's the thing we're all praying for, waiting for, hoping for in this land. And tonight we get a glimpse of hope as we hope to see this materialize and come to fruition. Yair, that's all I have for today. Very dramatic evening. I'm going to have trouble falling asleep, but it's, big night over here.
Yeah, definitely. Big night. Just this is proof that there is hope. We are thinking about the future, bigger, better future. What I learned from this war is that when things look too complicated, too hard for us to fix, that's where we should be expecting and looking for God's supernatural intervention, for a miracle, because our God doesn't do small miracles. He does huge miracles to make sure that we know that it's all because of him and not because of us. So I'm hopeful tonight. Call on all of you to pray for the situation, to pray for wisdom, to all the leaders involved in this process, to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Thank you for joining us for this live broadcast. Thank you very much, Mati. I will bring you the olive oil one day and the honey that I have in my house. And thank you to all our team that made this live possible. And make sure to like, share, subscribe, and keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem.
Amen to that.